Good afternoon, everybody on the West Coast, East Coast, and everywhere in between. We are live coming to you on Facebook. It is time for another Lessons from the Front, and tonight I have a great guest for us who happens to be a great friend, a great American. His name is Cody Bandars, former Navy SEAL. Cody, welcome to Lessons from the Front. We're excited to hear about your story.
Well, thank you very much, Todd. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate it.
Love the Texas flag. You got the trident above you.
I do.
Now, what is that on the Texas flag?
What is affectionately known as the bone frog. It's a piece of SEAL team memorabilia, I guess you could say. It's a symbol for all of our fallen brothers. It actually originated on the East Coast SEAL teams from SEAL Team 4, East Europe Jungle Warfare.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to get into your SEAL team time here in just a little bit, and you know, as always, we like to kind of follow a certain pattern on the show, and we want to find out. Certainly, we want to hear about your time in the SEALs, and we want to hear about what you continue to do today. But tell us a little bit about who was Cody before Cody became a SEAL.
Man, Cody was a Midwestern boy. Grew up playing sports in Nebraska. I played football and ran track and hunted and fished, and I had a good life. I didn't have any older brothers to beat up on me, so I had to kind of toughen up in other ways. But another thing you could say about me, or that I'd say about myself, was I had some discipline from sports, and I had a dad that taught me a lot, but I didn't have a ton of drive, if you will, to kind of finish what was in front of me. You know, I didn't know much besides team sports as far as, you know, working for a purpose, if you will. I always worked hard, and I had summer jobs and worked hard in school, but you know, before joining the Navy, which wouldn't come for many years later, in my life, it was I wouldn't say directionless, but I didn't have much of a purpose. I think that'd be a safe thing to say.
So you were like a lot of kids. You were soul searching. You were just kind of looking for direction. Team sports gave you a good focus. It gave you something to zero in on. Gave you teammates to rally around. Were you a troublemaker at all?
Yeah, I definitely had my wild years. I'd say late, you know, mid to late high school, and then in my first couple of years of college, I definitely kind of stretched the limits, if you will, and tried my parents' patience and that of law enforcement a few times. I don't think I was doing it for ill-intentioned reasons. I wasn't a bully. I was usually sticking up for the kids getting bullied. I wasn't exclusive with who I hung out with. You know, I hung out with, you know, all shapes and sizes, and but yeah, I definitely had a wild streak in me that was leading to, in many ways, a bad road, if you will. There was time for that. It was as much drugs as it was some drinking at a young age, and, you know, being wild.
So that's interesting, though. It's not like you were getting in trouble at the sacrifice of others. The kind of trouble I heard you say you're getting into was really more in the security and safety and support of those who were in trouble. Is that? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, some of that, but I don't need to also sugarcoat it. I mean, there was also just some rambunctious, you know, young male behavior going on.
Sure.
There was a few fights here and there, and some.
But you weren't out to cause harm to others.
No, I wasn't vandalizing anything. I wasn't stealing anything. I think for what I was doing, I was trying to have a good time. But that also, I think, definitely wore thin a few times, and I could definitely see kind of a fork in the road of do right, or you know, change my ways and straighten things out, or continue to do what I was doing.
But you didn't go right into the Navy or the teams right out of high school. You took a little bit different road. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a lot different than a lot of folks I know. I basically, you know, when I graduated high school in 2001, leading up to my graduation, I looked very hard at joining the Marine Corps. I had a couple of really good friends that did, but I guess.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. You said the Marine Corps, is that right?
Yeah, EGA, right on the wine glass. You bet.
Looky there. How about that? Okay.
That's for you.
Sorry. I didn't mean to distract you.
We've officially got 2 EGAs in Todd's frame now. So yeah, I really did look hard. I didn't have a direction. I had a few things I could have or would have wanted to do in college. I'd kind of gotten to the end of my athletic ability and knew I wasn't going to, be any sort of star in college playing football. And I looked hard at the Marine Corps because it had an attraction to me as a place to go to have a purpose and have honor and be part of kind of, I think it's somewhat of a cliche sometimes where people say be part of something bigger than yourself. I mean, it was the Navy slogan.
Sure.
You're like, join the Navy for crying out loud with the recruiting banner, but I really didn't have that going for me. And that was something that attracted me, and also the service to my country. We were at a time of relative peace. There was things going on, but nothing that anyone was focused on at a national level. And so, long story short, I was pretty much talked out of it or chickened out of it, however you want to put it. I didn't lean forward into it hard enough to do it, aside from talking to a recruiter a few times and talking ad nauseum with my friends that were committed to it. So I went to college. But as I said, graduating high school in 2001, my freshman year of college, 9/11 happened. And for me, that changed things forever. I had friends that,
I mean, I know it obviously changed things, but how did it change things for you personally?
Personally, I mean, I felt an oath of responsibility to my country that I'd never sworn to. And I admired my buddies that were doing it. I talked about them all the time. I wrote them letters and couldn't wait to get their letters back. And both of them had graduated and were in the School of Infantry. And 9/11 happens, and it was clear to me that these guys were going to go to war and defend our country. And yet here I was, in college in a fraternity. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely wasn't purpose-filled in a fight for the greater good or defending our Constitution or our country, our freedoms.
So do you remember where you were when 9/11 hit?
Absolutely, yeah. I had just kind of opened my eyes and woken up in the fraternity house. And me and my roommates are kind of bumping around, getting ready to go to our first round of classes. I have no idea why I did this, but I scheduled myself an 8 a.m. class Monday through Friday, my freshman year, first semester. So I was usually up early, begrudgingly. But anyway, I was getting ready.
Who was your counselor? I don't want them.
Yeah, right. They were all engineering guys. So I was getting ready for calculus, and somebody had run in our room and said a plane hit the World Trade Center. His name was Scott, and he came screaming. We had a 3-man room. It was a big room, so everybody usually congregated in our room. And we turned on the TV, and the first tower was smoking. And by the time I left for my class, the second tower had been hit. And so it was, I remember it vividly. I remember walking to class. I remember the TA saying, "Hey, I know there's a lot going on. Let's make it through this class, and you guys go do what you need to do." I remember my second class was sociology, so there's a lot more to talk about there. We spent the entire class period just talking about 9/11. But being on a college campus, there was a lot of emotions. Very ethnic campus, and lots of different groups of people getting together for different reasons on that day, and the weeks following. I remember it vividly.
So that obviously brought the idea of joining the military back into focus.
It absolutely did.
And so, is it safe to say that was your trigger to get in the military?
I think it's lit a fuse that was on a very slow burn, because I didn't have a clear route in. I had my parents, and I was paying for school, and definitely didn't just send me straight. I know folks, and some of them that we have mutual friends, that was it. For them, they went right to the recruiting office that day. And I'd be proud to say I did that, but I didn't. It definitely got my interest in a more personal way as I watched it, over the next couple of years as Afghanistan and Iraq started to unfold, and we could see it in the news media. By the time I was graduating college a couple of years later, like, it was on my mind so much so that I was starting to talk to recruiters again, thinking about going through OCS and, trying to.
Sure. And a couple of years later, it was really getting heated up.
Sure was. To me, that was all the more reason to do it. But again, there was this kind of outside voice, if you will, that was like, well, you've got this college degree, you should use it. There's plenty of other people to do that work. You go get on with your career. And so I did. I went to Dallas. I also had a couple criminal charges against me that I felt would be a challenge to make it in the military with by that point. And so, a little bit of that rambunctious behavior and lawlessness, if you will. So I moved to Dallas and started my career, and gosh, within a year, I was pulling my own hair out and knowing what was going on overseas, and knowing that I just felt this debt to my country. And I started looking at what I could do to serve and still do what I was doing as an engineer. And I was looking at the fire departments and the Coast Guard, and kind of, not that those are half measures, but for what I felt, which was a call to go fight for my country, with the conflicts and the wars we had going, I was just doing what I could to kind of tiptoe into that water, at a volunteer fire department or reserve Coast Guard unit, when I knew kind of in my mind and my mind's eye that in my heart that what I wanted to do was serve. And it was just so prevalent. I was connected to so many people that had already done it or were doing it. And it was actually Clint Bruce and Dee Elliott, both guys that are near and dear and part of the beginnings of Carry the Load, that kind of shed light into that dark room that I didn't know how to walk into for me.
So I want you to share with everybody, and I have the privilege of knowing this story already.
Yeah.
You got called out when it was time.
Yeah.
When it was time to join, you got called out a little bit. Tell everybody the story about how you were called out and ultimately said, it's time for me to join.
Sure. So I was in like a safety/security team with a bunch of guys at church. A lot of them are vets and officers and law enforcement guys. And kind of the leader of that team was a guy named Dee Elliott. And Dee had lunch with me, and we kind of talked, and he asked me right off the bat, hey, what's your biggest regret in life? I was like, wow, great lead-in question. This is going to be an interesting relationship. And I knew it right then. I said, I feel like I owe my country a debt I haven't paid for. I think I need to serve. But I'm 25 and I've had this knee injury, and I kind of started the excuses, and Dee said, well, as a 56-year-old that's done it, there's a way to do it if you want to, or you need to find an outlet for your service. And it wasn't long after that where Clint Bruce, founder of Carry the Load, he bumped into me at the hallway in church after one of our safety meetings, and kind of looked at me funny, and he said, hey, I don't mean this any certain way, but you've kind of got the swagger of an E5 in the SEAL teams. I was like, geez, I don't even know what to do with that. It almost kind of felt like a dare, who is this guy? Why is he saying that to me?
Oh, it was a dare.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't 2 or 3 months later, not even, where I'd been laid off. It was a tough economy. I was in land development. And so we were at that same, safety meeting, and we were taking prayer requests, and Dee pipes up and says, well, Cody lost his job yesterday. And we had we had a group prayer going. And then after prayer, I open my eyes and look up, and Clint's just looking at me. He's kind of nodding his head. And in front of everybody, he's like, hey, Cody, you're out of work, huh? Well, I know who's hiring. I know who's always hiring. I was like, yeah, Clint, who's that? He's like, Naval Special Warfare. So I kind of, I had kind of taken to some deep introspection and prayer by the time about this opportunity I had to kind of be unbridled, unemployed, and it was time to do something. And I kind of felt that coming, and so I engaged Clint and Dee a little further on that, and got the right conversations going.
Well, and I referenced that, and I'm glad you shared that with us, because, so many of us, there's so many different paths that lead to the military. And for a lot of people, even on 9/11, like you pointed out, some people just march right down to their recruiter's office and join.
Yeah.
Some of us had, we weren't on the right track. We knew we needed structure. We knew we needed discipline. And so, we found our way there in ways like that. Some of us, like yourself, it takes a couple of life-changing events that are directly fired on us for us to go, oh, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. And so, you obviously fell into that latter category, but what I've always admired about you is you didn't just check a box and say, well, I'm just, I'm going to go down to this office or that office, and I'm going to sign up. I'm going to see where it goes. You said, okay, you know what? If I'm going in, I'm going in. And if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And I'm not going to accept anything less than, than the cream of the crop. And so I've always admired that about you, because you've had this humble nature, and you said it again today. I wish I could have said I went right down to the recruiting office. Well, that's okay. We all do things, on our own pace. So again, in front of everybody, I've always admired that about you. So
I appreciate it.
Let's kind of fast forward a little bit and talk about your service. And one of the things that I love hearing is the individual stories, the stories that really stick with us. The stories that kind of mold us into who we are today in such a way that, we talked about your kids before we came on, in ways that you're going to be able to help mold them. Is there any story that you experienced that you're willing to share with us that really sticks out in that way?
There is. And I think to kind of go back to what you were saying just for a brief moment, what kind of sums it up, I was with a good friend of mine in the teams. He was, look, a lot of the guys I served with were younger than me, since I waited so long to get in. But this guy was a little bit closer to my age, and we had gone through training together, and we were at SEAL Team 10 as new guys together. And we were on a training trip one time. We're on this long drive, and I said, hey, Ian, I was like, why did you end up joining the SEAL teams? And he said, I've thought about the answer to this question for a long time, and the best answer I can give is I didn't have anything better to do at the time with my life. And if you didn't know Ian and you heard somebody say that, you'd be like, wow, what a flippant way to just go be a Navy SEAL. Like, wow. But knowing Ian, that was actually a very well thought answer, because it's a way for him to say, this was the best thing for me to do with my life. There was nothing better that I could have done. And I think
I love that. Wait a minute, hold on. I got to park it there for a minute, because they're just the word play. I didn't have anything better to do with my life versus there was nothing better I could have done with my life at that point.
And that's what Ian meant.
Oh man, that gave me chills.
Well, it gave me chills. It brought home something that I don't think I could have put into words at the time. When we were all training and getting ready for our first deployment in the teams, and it just kind of that moment stuck with me. On our first workup, a guy that I'd gotten to know well, but there's not a whole lot of talking about, hey, where you're from and why'd you join, and what'd your dad do, and tell me, when was the first time you cried from a bloody nose, and how many fights have you, it doesn't go that way. You just kind of pick it up as you go. And for me, I was honestly a little, not a lot of guys wanted to go deep and have deep conversations. So when I asked him, why did you end up joining? Because he's a brilliant guy, extremely talented in every way, shape, and form. He could have done anything he wanted, it seemed like. For me to ask him that question and say, I've thought long about this, and the best answer I can give is I didn't have anything better to do with my life at the time. And what he meant by that was there was nothing better for me to do than this. I thought that was great. Digression.
No, it's not a digression. That's the bonus story right there. Because I can tell you're wanting to go down a different path, but golly, that's going to resonate with it.
Well, it's resonated with me, and that guy still serves. He's doing great things. So, here's, stories for my kids or lessons for my kids. One thing that comes to mind, I got to Afghanistan for my first deployment in 2013. And kind of had to, beg, borrow, steal, drug deal to get out to my outpost, catching different flights. I was traveling in a very small group, and I ended up being one of two guys that took a flight out here. So it was like, get to the staging base in Kyrgyzstan and then sit on the ground for 4 or 5 days, going to the air office, trying to deal with all the different force liaisons to get a flight.
Okay, hold on. Explain that to people, because you're talking about, okay, you've got to go out and meet your unit. Your unit is way out, who knows where.
Yeah.
And you got to beg, steal, and borrow to get there.
Yeah, I spent the first half of my deployment with a platoon in the United States doing some training engagements with foreign countries and a couple trips on our side of the hemisphere. And then midway through, about 3 or 4 of us flew through Europe to get to Afghanistan to go meet up with prospective units. And so, you're in Baltimore, you get on a big military rotator, like a contracted chartered flight, run by a private company. And there's a bunch of people getting on there, to military folks either moving to Europe, a couple folks like us that were deploying, and stop in Germany, stop in Turkey. And then we eventually took this plane all the way to a staging base called Kyrgyzstan, Manaus, Kyrgyzstan, which was, built up for the staging of the war on terror. And so once we got there, they gave us a barracks assignment. It was a big GBU tent. We go throw our stuff, lock our guns up, and then, my my kind of role was, hey, go find us a flight to Afghanistan. And so every day I'd go find the air liaisons from the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy, and say, hey, you got anything going to Bagram? Well, we do, but you can't get on it. Or, well, we might, but it's still in Europe. Or it's coming out of Afghanistan now, but it might not be going back. And literally 5 days in a row, going to the chow hall and working out and stopping by the air office. And finally I found a flight for us, and we got on the flight and, went to Bagram. So once we got in Bagram, it was kind of the same thing. I had to get from Bagram to an outstation, or a FOB actually, called Tarin Kowt in southeast Afghanistan. And so, same thing, go to the air office, talk to the admins, and try to find a flight. And that one went a little quicker. But I find, we get on the C-130, get out to Bagram, a couple stops on the way to drop people off, and met some familiar faces when I got there, but I was still trying to get used to everything and the time zone differences. And met a friend that introduced me to some of the medical staff in the med hut. We had a surgical team there. And I went in there after a workout one day to talk to the folks, and just stopping by to say hi after I got off my shift in the jock. And I looked in the back, and back in the low lit area, there was like a 5-year-old kid, a boy, with a hole in his chest about that big, with a chest seal on it, and tubes in his mouth and his throat, and IVs, and he's just laying there, and he's looking at me. And I remember hearing that a kid got shot on target by the Taliban, and that they brought him back to our base to get him recovered. But there I was looking at him, and the story was, the guys were out doing a village clearance, and Taliban had already pushed out of the area, but once they saw the village clearance coming in, they kind of set up an ambush, if you will, and kind of rained down an ambush on that village. And their people were still there, their women and their children. And so this kid was shot, by folks he probably knew. Took a round to the chest. And so, I've been on the ground for a couple of days. I was kind of itchy, working a job, watching guys, watching the units go out and do the work. And day 3, here I am face to face with a kid 10 feet away that's got a hole in his chest, fighting for his life. Probably has no idea where he is, has no one there talking his native language, doesn't know where his parents are, and he's just there fighting for it. And for me, I guess that's a perspective that not a lot of people have I'd call it a blessing to experience. We have a lot of things, a lot of controversy in our country on our home soil right now. And there's a lot of, I think, different viewpoints on the way things should go, could go, or the right way to do something, the right way to raise your kids, or what to be thankful for. There's a lot going on, and there always has been. But to know what it's like outside this country, in different parts of the world where people are fighting for their lives and giving their lives and having their lives taken, seeing that puts a perspective on you. So in that moment, I couldn't help but think, what if that were my kid? Or what if I was that kid? How would I feel? And so I always kind of vowed to to bring that experience back and teach my kids the great things about our country and how hard fought our Constitution, our values, our freedom, our liberty, and our way of life is. And that's an example that I plan to teach them.
So, I mean, golly, a lot to unpack there, Cody.
Yeah.
So this young child, and he was about how old?
5.
So 5 years old, probably was collateral damage to the Taliban, although it's entirely possible that it was intentional. Probably his first memory will be laying in a hospital room in somewhere that he never knew about. And you're right. I mean, we have a lot of things going on here, and to be able to, I mean, I honestly, I don't even know where to take this one. It's one of the first times I've really kind of not known where to take something, and I don't want to talk politics on this, but how do we get that across to people? How do we make them understand that, yes, you're well within your right to have those discussions. You're well within your right to exercise your freedom of speech. But, oh, by the way, freedom is not free. How do we get that point across?
Yeah, I agree. It's not. I don't think it's a political conversation. I think it's a conversation of history, and a conversation of humanity, and a conversation of values. There's definitely some hot button words to throw out at a time like this that I would absolutely refrain from and think it would detract from the value we could get. I think one of the most important things we can do is teach history to our kids in a way that tells a complete story of how the world was and compare that to the way it is now. I think that's invaluable. But also teaching our kids what it means to be free and have liberty now and what that costs, I think gives them a relation to something that they can't experience. One of my good friends, John Wayne Welding, lost his leg in the Battle of Shock Valley. Silver Star guy, great guy. He's done so many great things for this country since he lost that leg. And my kids know his name. And he was the first guy with a metal leg they ever met. And the guy just bleeds red, white, and blue for our active duty troops and our veterans and our first responders and our law enforcement officers. And they know his name because they know that he lost that leg fighting for freedom. And it's stories like that I think we can kind of paint a picture of that sacrifice you're talking about. I take my kids to the events now and they see guys with metal legs. They're not afraid to talk to them. They know exactly what the most likely case is. And they get to go up to them and say, "Hey, you've got metal legs like my daddy's friend." And they know, they respect those guys and they know it. But I think,
go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a way for us to be thankful for and recognize the fact that freedom isn't free is to know more about places where it's taken for granted or not given. I mean, there's places where we've both been and where we both know and where our friends still go, where freedom is a myth. It's not apparent. It's not real. It might be taken advantage of, and hey, bud, I'm on a call. Okay, buddy. That's one of my little ones. Yes, we can. They haven't seen me for a couple of days. But there's places where there's like a guise of freedom, right? Where there might be elections or there might be a free press, if you will, but they don't have it like we do. No one in this country is going to get in trouble for what they say in the classroom about the way they feel or the way their dad. You can lose a job, you can offend somebody, but you're not going to the gulag. We have a freedom here that's unlike any place on earth, and it's a very special, very fragile freedom. is very fragile. I don't think people realize how fragile what frames that freedom, like how fragile that picture frame is, because it can break easily, and it's not going to break in one fell swoop. It's going to be the death of 1,000 cuts. And so I think the biggest danger to that is ourselves. We're not doing our part to educate our kids on that and let them know that this isn't automatic. It takes somebody standing at the door and fighting for it to happen.
So I've heard it said, I think one of the best ways I heard it said, to paraphrase it, was not just that freedom isn't free, but freedom is rented by the blood of those who have gone before. And the word rented really stood out to me, and you were just referencing it, how fragile it is. And if we're not careful, that we lose it. And if it weren't for individuals like you who, okay, maybe it wasn't on the time frame that you look back and say, okay, that's the time frame I should have followed, but you followed it. And so if it wasn't for y'all, and it wasn't for so many who made that ultimate sacrifice, we to steal a term from right now, we'd be in forbearance, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to ask you another question along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the individual who says, man, I wish I would have served. I wish I would have taken advantage of the opportunity when I had it. I wish I would have acted upon those impulses when I had them.
Yeah.
What do you say to that guy?
Well, for one, if they're anywhere near serving age, I tell them exactly what D. Elliott, God rest his soul, told me, which is it's never too late. But two, I say, well, let's find a place for you to serve. And Todd, let me just say, like, you're one of those guys that answered that call, and you stood at that door. So, you're one that went before for me. And then there, we all know countless that went before both of us, and we'll never know all of them, but we should remember them and honor them. But for the guy that says, man, I wish I would have done that, or that's so cool, I can't believe you did that, I should have. There's a couple ways that conversation can go when I talk to a guy. Sometimes it's the uncomfortable way, which is, why didn't you do it? And I'm not saying, why didn't you, to shame anybody. I really want to help this person, whoever this is, get to the core of why they didn't do something that either they should have at the time, or they look back on now and regret they didn't do. Because for me, D unlocking that for me with a question, and then a couple of an answer. And his answer wasn't, well, what do you want to do? It was, hey, you've got time to go do this. And if you're not going to do it, then let's find an outlet for your service, or you're going to live a life of regret. And so by asking somebody, hey, why didn't you? And it, like, again, it's not a judgment and it's not out of shame. I'm literally asking. I want to know if you have chosen to share with me, a veteran, I wish I would have, or hey, I admire your service, or thank you for yours, I wish I would have done that. If you're going to trust me with that statement, then I'm going to challenge you back and say, well, why didn't you do it? Let's talk about that, because there's a place for you to go now to do it. And it doesn't have to be in the uniform, and it doesn't have to be at the fire station. But this country, I think right now, needs a heart of service at its core, because we're suffering in so many ways.
Absolutely.
And so, and that's the next 99% of the time, it's not leading to that guy going down to the recruiting station and me mentoring him through, enlisting and going to the Navy, right? That's not usually how it goes. Although it has. It's happened. Sure. It's happened a few times. I got one going right now. A great kid. He's out of college, been out for a year now. He's just kind of right where I was. He's an engineer, Brian. He doesn't like what he's doing. And now he's asking me, man, why did you do it? How did you do it? And what do I do?
And wait a minute.
Yeah.
What did you say? Because there was nothing better for me to do with my life at that time.
I had nothing better for me to do. Yeah, there you go.
I'm telling you, that resonates with me.
I'm glad it does. So I would say, for anyone out there that's saying that, and if you're asking, or if anyone's asking, man, I should have served, what now? Or I'll never have that again. There is so many ways to serve this great country and and humanity. So many ways to do it, that to not be involved in that service and have that fulfillment and that call and purpose in your life once you're involved in it, I think you're missing out. And Todd, we've been there and done it together. You know, I mean,
Sure.
me and you walked, we walked the trail at Carry the Load with the last surviving Pacific Theater Medal of Honor recipient last year together.
Yes, Woody Williams.
Yeah, and to be involved in something where you get to honor somebody like that, I couldn't imagine not being involved.
Well, we're lucky to have you. We really are. You've been a great ambassador for us, and you know, I mean, it's easy to talk about what you continue to do in service, and that is, you know, participating in this organization. And I know that even well beyond this organization, you continue to serve your country and your community in a lot of different ways. And you know, again, I wish more people would take that approach. And for everyone out there, I want to challenge them on that. You said it, and one of my very dear friends, I asked him the same question at one point, and he said 4 words: there is still time. If you're still breathing, there is still time to serve your country, to serve your community. No, maybe not in the way that you and I are, you know, have served. Maybe not in the way that, you know, that people have shed blood for the country, but that's okay. That doesn't matter. It takes all kinds, all angles, all aspects. And so, you know, I want to say thank you very much on behalf of the Carry the Load community for your continued service with Carry the Load. I want to say thank you on behalf of the United States for your, you know, for your service to this country in a war zone. And I've enjoyed as much. What I love about these things is that even though I know people as well as I do, like you, I always come away with a nugget. There's always something that I come away with that makes me go, huh, I had something I hadn't heard. And you gave me a couple of them today. And so I want to say thank you to that, or thank you to you for that. And as we always kind of fade out this conversation, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you down the stretch. Number one is, who are you carrying? Who do you continue to carry? That is our mantra in Carry the Load. And I want to hear about that person.
Yeah, I think for me, I think there's 2 things that come to mind when that question's asked to me. The first one is always D. Elliott, who passed away last year or 2 years ago, from ALS, and you know, likely related to service, as we're finding out about our Vietnam service members. But D lived a life of service, and he died so well, giving that back and mentoring young folks in all walks of life, and always pointing it to service. So I always carry D. The other one would be Caleb Nelson, who was a SEAL at SEAL Team 10, who was actually from my hometown. We grew up just a couple miles away, weren't friends, but he passed away about 3 months before I got to SEAL Team 10 in combat operations in Afghanistan. So it was kind of like this kind of juxtaposition where, you know, I went to the team and checked into the team where he had passed away from, and I got to know his family well. We honored him on the relay last year, and his father came out for that. It was great. But I'll always carry, even though, you know, I never served with him, I got to serve in his wake. And so that's, those are my 2. I'd also say, like you said, you know, it's not over. There is still time. You know, you could look at this life as a bunch of races. You know, not everybody can run that race and be a Navy SEAL. Not everybody can run that race and become a Marine Corps officer. Not everybody can run the race and become a SWAT sniper or an EMT. And you know, but there's a million races to run. There's so many races we can run, and we don't have to finish first in all of them. But what we can do is we can put our efforts in, and my goodness, what difference does it make, and how different the world looks when we do serve. And there's so many ways to do it. And you know, you were part of the reason, and one of the connections that got me involved in Carry Load, though I was there with Clint at the beginning. You know, my relationship with you and Debbie, and you introduced Debbie and I, our executive director, and you know, you being on our board with your leadership. You know, I thank you for that because I'm humbled to be involved. There's nowhere else that I'd rather be. So, you know, thank you. And I'd just like to say to everybody watching, if you want to know more, you know where to find us, and get involved. Find your passion in that, and be there. You will never regret the hours you put towards service. And there's nothing else you can say that about.
There is still time. I love that. So Cody, thank you very much for agreeing to be on today. And, you know, again, man, it's what I love about these is I pick up nuggets about people that I think I know pretty well. And you taught me a couple of really good things today. So thanks for your time. And
thank you.
So for everybody else out there watching, we appreciate you joining us. You know, as always, there's a couple of things that I want to remind you of. Number one, and we talked about it in depth, be the flag, whatever that means, whether that means serving your community, whether that means being a volunteer coach for your kids, be the flag, show them the values that it means to be an American. And always, always, always have a great answer to the question, who are you carrying? Cody.